First of all, with the infrared imagery, what you want to see or not is the brighter colors, those higher, colder cloud tops. And when you start to see more of a symmetrical look after it was interacting with the land in Cuba, we're starting to see some strength, although we're still at 120 miles per hour. But now that the eye is going through an eye wall replacement cycle, it's going to most likely start to increase in strength somewhat. Now, it's a Category 3. The National Hurricane Center now wants to keep it as a 3. Here in the CNN World Weather Center, we're not so sure on that, because not only do you not have just 90 miles, all right, between in the straits from Cuba to Florida, you've got really now a distance that should take this now on a farther track up toward Sarasota. This is going to be a lot like last year when Hurricane Matthew hugged the coast on the East Coast. When it came through Freeport in the Bahamas, there was a little wobble when it underwent one of these eye wall replacement cycles, and it just stayed off the coast by about 30 miles. When it's on the coast, it's catastrophic damage, but because it stayed off last year, Matthew was light to moderate, but it did a lot of damage on A1A, flooding up and down the coast, even at Jacksonville. They'll see that again with this one, even though it's on the other coast. And then we had this historic flooding in the Carolinas that killed about 24. But here, let's break this down. No longer is it west-northwest, it's northwest. So again, it still has that component to move more to the west. I still believe when we break this down and we take a look at the new track, this is what we're thinking right now. Instead of the 90 miles as mentioned, this system's going to travel about 280. So it moves from the center, moves probably pretty close to Naples, and somewhere in between Fort Myers and Tampa, we're looking at a landfall. But it's hard to predict the landfall because, like Matthew last year, skirting the coast, it only takes one little wobble here or there to give us a landfall. It could be now that we're seeing a shift in the Tampa area of about 15 to 20 miles, which actually is the worst news for Tampa because it puts you in the eye band of the strongest winds. It'll give you the surge up into the bay, most likely. Even if it's to the north, we're going to be looking at a return flow. So, again, that's the concern. Consensus is generally maybe around Sarasota, Florida, possible landfall. Bradenton, all right, that's Manatee County. Anna Marie Island's going to be smacked with this as well. And it's still, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, I noticed this a little bit of a shift from Atlanta, which may keep them out of some of the strongest winds, but they're still in the worst quadrant. But by that time, we'll start to see the storm lose some strength. After that, when it moves up toward Tennessee, the models looked like Harvey, just meandering all over the place, not having a steering current. And that was kind of frightening, thinking, okay, here we go with something that's going to hang around for a while and drop copious amounts of rain. But by then, we think it's going to be dried up, and it's not going to have the amount of rainfall that Harvey had. It doesn't have that water source, so maybe 2 to 4 inches. But we've got to get back and take a look at this path because this means everything, and it's critical now for the entire West Coast and everyone who lives in that front right quadrant. Everyone in this north white quadrant, which is the center of the entire state, and even into Georgia, which we talked about with the pine trees and the broad pine area with the down trees there. Still looking at Florida and Light calling for 3.4 million to lose power. FEMA is going closer to 5, but even at 3.4 million losing power, that is going to be the greatest power outage in history. And then restoring that power, they believe, will be the greatest restoration of power ever taken place in the U.S. The eye is interesting. We're still seeing some wobbling, but notice the bright yellow banding outside the eye. When that forms and circulates better, when it gets away from the coastline, it'll tighten up, and we should see an increase. So even if it stays at a Category 3, that's still a major hurricane. If it gets closer to a 4, you're not going to know much in the way of difference here. We're still going to have incredible storm surge. We still have, of course, the tornado
the worst of Irma, and then it's about enduring the aftermath. Do you have what you need to sustain yourself down there for 1, 2, maybe even 3 days before they can start to get infrastructure back in place, power back, and stuff you need for everyday life?
Oh, yes, sir. I've got enough stuff for a month. We've got plenty of food, water. You know, a lot of people were saying, well, you got to get out. You know, I don't want to leave. I have an emotional attachment to Key West. All my family's ashes are out in the Atlantic, so I'm staying. Secondly, if a bridge goes out, everybody was talking about that. If a bridge goes out and when we're, without supplies for a few weeks or a month, I'd much rather be home and on this side of the bridge closing than on the other side where everybody's scrambling to find a place to live and fighting for gas and 10 million people are trying to get back home and don't know when. So I'd much rather be here.
I hear you. The challenge is any way you look at it. Do me a favor. Check in with me over the next few hours. Just let me know that everything is straight down there. And as you start reaching out to others, just let us know how things are doing. Again, I don't want to give you a hard time. I'm just hoping that your time there is not that hard. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Be safe. God bless. I'll check with you in a little bit. John Berman is at the tip of the peninsula of Florida. He is in downtown Miami. He has been getting buffeted by wind there as we start to see wow, look at that rain coming down on John Berman as he struggles to stay put. A lesser man would have been blown away long ago. How you doing, John? I'm trying to draw it out so I can have you there silent for as long as possible.
Shorter questions, Chris. Shorter questions. No, I can tell you, it's raining. It's raining very, very hard here. The wind blowing as strong as it has now. Clearly, these bands now becoming closer, not just to bands anymore, but to the bulk of this storm. As you said, the northern eye over Key West right now, which means that a more substantial part of the storm is moving over Miami. We've been feeling it here since yesterday afternoon for some time. The wind's just pounding us here. You saw Derek Van Dam out of Miami Beach. I used to be able to see Miami Beach, but now the rain falling so hard and the soup out there just so thick, kicking up, that it is, no longer even visible. I can see some debris, by the way, falling off the buildings over here, blowing in the other direction, not coming our way. But now we're starting to see the first signs of things really flying around here, Chris, as the wind picks up. I've been giving you power updates throughout the morning. 250,000 people still without power in Miami-Dade. I say still, that number is going to go up before it goes down. Obviously, the winds here knocking things out just left, right, and center. Again, when we could see Miami Beach out there all morning long, what we've been seeing is these mini bursts of green light as the transformers have been exploding, and I haven't seen lights go on there. I think it's safe to say most of the power is out on Miami Beach. Where we are, hard to tell, but 250,000 people without power. And as I've been saying, to put that in perspective, Hurricane Harvey, in the height of the floods, there were 300,000 people without power. So about equal right now, and really the worst of it now just beginning, Chris.
All right, so we know that the estimates are getting close to 400,000 across the state without power. They expect it could be in the millions. The wind is what always gets the headline, but as you know, it is the water that winds up doing the most destruction. Storm surge is a big concern. You showed us earlier that those boats, they tie those lines to the docks, and then often the docks give way. You saw one give way. Any sign of increase in water level yet that's not just the tide, but the storm?
We've been watching that very, very closely, for our own personal selfish reasons here, because if we see it starting to rise, we're going to get out of here and get out of here fast. The answer, Chris, is not really. Mostly right now, it appears to be tidal. These docks you see behind me right now, these little docks that line the bay right here, the water goes up to them and maybe even overtops them occasionally just because of tide and normal waves. So right now, it still has some room to go for when the storm surge comes. But, again, with the winds like this pushing up the Florida Peninsula, the storm surge itself, the worst of it might not come for some time. They had been predicting 3 to 6 feet here in Miami, the Miami-Dade area. And if that does happen, then it would creep up over those docks completely, maybe even to where we're standing right now. But not yet. Not yet, Chris.
All right, thank you for that. We're going to check back with you, John. As a friend of yours for many years, the way your legs are whipping around in the wind speaks to a fundamental structural instability. You should probably tie yourself to something more resilient, maybe a small dog, if you can find one, just to anchor you in place for when we come back to you. It's a good thing you didn't wear a hat. We're going to check back with John Berman. You take moments of levity when you can find them. This is just the beginning of Hurricane Irma. We are literally seeing the least of the worst. All right. Now, one of the assets that we have at CNN is we have a camera. We have a system of cameras, but we're going to be giving you shots of
winds are in Collier. They have pulled all county responders off the road effective immediately, and they are asking you to shelter in place. They've also declared a civil emergency. We also just heard from Marco Island Fire and PD. Both of those agencies are now pulled off the roads as well. So in Marco Island, both the police and the fire departments are now off the road. So again, if you haven't gotten it up to this point, you can hear the wind.
From an earth cam there at Fort Lauderdale Beach. There we go. Wow, you can really see it's. You can see the palm tree there under the graphic. If we can lose that, there we go. You can see how the palm tree is swaying in the wind,
power.
and you see the heavy surf.
Debris on the
waves
road.
Are very dangerous now. And the good news is you're not seeing anyone on the beach because it's just not safe to be out there.
Definitely not, and that also shows that this is going to affect the entire state of Florida, both the east and west coasts. We want to take it out to Wayne.